My wife, Ruby, has amnesia. The only person she forgot is me. She got back together with her old flame and asked me for a divorce. I was ecstatic. We signed a postnup. If she was unfaithful, I'd get half of everything. Me, let's do it. I'd be an idiot not to. Money is way more important than love. But they said you loved me so much. I was playing cards with friends when I heard about Ruby's car accident. Mr. Quinn, bad news. Ms. Johnston was in a car accident. My face lit up. Is she dead? Not yet. I was a little disappointed. Well, call me back when she is. Huh? I hung up before her assistant could say another word. A few minutes later, she called back, her tone grave. Mr. Quinn, it's a bit complicated. I think you should come see for yourself. When I got to the hospital, I found out Ruby had amnesia. She remembered everyone except for me. As for why she crashed, all I can say is she had it coming. Her old flame, Tim, finally came back to the country today. She was on her way to pick him up from the airport when it happened. Right now, Tim was holding Ruby's arm, his eyes red and his voice choked with emotion. It's all my fault. I never should have let you come get me. Ruby gently wiped away his tears. Tim, don't cry. It breaks my heart to see you cry. I rushed over, feigning concern. Ruby, are you okay? I was so worried when I heard about the accident. I added silently, worried you didn't die. Ruby's perfect brows furrowed. She looked me up and down, clearly unimpressed. You're my husband? I nodded. She slowly uttered 2 words. Let's divorce. The incredible news left me dizzy. If we divorced, wouldn't that mean half of Ruby's fortune would be mine? You see, the year before last, Ruby had this crazy idea and made me sign a property agreement. The agreement stated, in no uncertain terms, that if one of us became the at-fault party in the marriage, the other would get half of their assets in the divorce. Her asking for a divorce right now meant that half of her billions would soon be mine. Ruby, what an angel. I could just die. She said coldly, my heart only has room for Tim. Now that he's back, you should make way for him. Tim shot me a triumphant smirk, giving off the air of a king returning to his throne, while I was just a court jester. My voice was shaking with joy. I confirmed with her again and again, you really want a divorce? Ruby's voice deepened. You're not willing? Willing? Of course I was willing. If City Hall wasn't already closed, I'd pull out her 4 right now, push her wheelchair, and race over there. I had to get this divorce finalized today, no matter what. But as happy as I was, I still had to put on a show. As a dedicated actor, I had to play my part until the very end. I dug my nails into my palm, my eyes instantly turning red. I put on a pained, understanding expression. Ruby, you know I love you very much, but I'd do anything to make you happy. Ruby's expression softened slightly. All right, you can go. Tim is here to take care of me. I asked, feigning concern, can Tim really take care of you? Tim scoffed. It's just taking care of someone. Oliver, you're underestimating me. With that, Tim poured Ruby a glass of water. Ruby, you wanted some hot water, right? Here you go. Ruby took a sip, and the next second, her face changed. It must have burned her because she spat it all out. Tim couldn't dodge in time and got sprayed. I watched them with a smile. Seeing Tim taking such good care of her really put my mind at ease. I got into the elevator and Tim followed me in. He strutted around like a victorious rooster. Oliver Quinn, you must hate me right now, don't you? Hate him? How could I hate him? I couldn't thank him enough. My dream of becoming the country's youngest billionaire was all in his hands. When I didn't answer, he took it as a yes and sighed. What can I say? Ruby is just so deeply in love with me. Don't worry, once you're gone, I'll take good care of her for you. I'm counting on you. Tim froze. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Then he broke into a smile. Oliver, keep pretending. I know you must be dying inside. Ruby is a high society heiress that every man wants. I wasn't bothered. Once I divorced Ruby and became a billionaire, I'd be the most sought-after bachelor in town. As for that old witch Ruby, whoever wanted her could have her. As a thank you gift, I sent Tim the 100-page guide I'd compiled on how to take care of Ruby. Tim opened the document, glanced at it, and froze. You're kidding me, right? Ruby is gentle and well-mannered. How could she be this hard to take care of? I smiled. Why don't you try it and find out? The year before last, Ruby was in another car accident. She was seriously injured and bedridden for 3 solid months. Speaking of which, she has some seriously bad luck. Other CEOs get stomach ulcers, she gets car accidents. One wrong move and it's game over. At the time, she was investing in a show I was directing and starring in. One good turn deserves another, so I took care of her for 3 months. And in those 3 months, I learned exactly how high maintenance she was. For starters, her water had to be exactly 37 degrees Celsius. She said it was easier to absorb and better for her stomach. After taking care of her, she gained a pound while I lost 3. Not long after she was discharged, she made me sign that property agreement. It was written in black and white. Whoever cheated would have to give the other person half of their assets. Now that she has amnesia, she's probably forgotten all about the agreement we signed. All I have to do now is wait for the divorce and become a happy little billionaire. As for Ruby, since Tim likes her so much, he can have her. When they get married, I'll have to send him a huge gift to thank him. The first thing I did was share the amazing news with my best friend, Aaron. Aaron listened and said with relief, "Good thing you never got emotionally invested in Ruby from the start." My marriage to Ruby was a business arrangement. In the beginning, she was in love with my stepbrother, Tim. But then Tim went abroad with no set return date. Ruby was getting older, and her family was pressuring her to get married, so she set her sights on me. I look a bit like my stepbrother. She could use me as a stand-in, look at my face and think of him. Conveniently, I had just lost a leading role to an actor who had a rich backer. My family was no help. My stepfather kept a tight grip on the money. If Ruby was willing to invest in my show, my role as the male lead would be secure. So we hit it off and got married. And just like that, Ruby used me as a substitute for her old flame, and I used her as my sugar mama. We lived peacefully for 3 years, pretending to be a loving couple. After 3 years of marriage, it would be a lie to say I had 0 feelings for her. If you asked me how much I felt, I'd say I loved her most when she was cheerfully funding my movies and TV shows. So yes, there were some feelings, but not many. To celebrate me becoming a billionaire-to-be, Aaron immediately ordered 10 models for me, so I could get a taste of the good life. A sweet-looking girl smiled at me. "What do you want to play, handsome?" I asked back, "What can you play?" Another, a more sophisticated type, replied, "We can play anything. It just depends on what you're in the mood for." I got excited. "Great, let's play werewolf." I'd been wanting to play werewolf for ages, but I could never get enough people together. With about 10 of us now, it was perfect. The sweet-looking girl froze. Play werewolf?" I frowned. "Didn't you say you could play anything?" The sophisticated one quickly smiled apologetically. We can. Whatever you like, handsome." So, I spent the whole night playing werewolf with the girls. When I drew a villager card, the girls protected me fiercely. When I drew a werewolf card, they covered for me relentlessly. Whichever team I was on, we won. The girls were beautiful and sweet, showering me with compliments like, "You're so smart, handsome, and wow, you're amazing." I was on cloud 9. Being rich is awesome. If I didn't have to get up early tomorrow to divorce Ruby, I would have played werewolf with them all night long. When I went to the hospital early the next morning, I ran into her assistant, who was there to visit. Her assistant saw me and looked relieved. "Mr. Quinn, you're here so early. I knew you still had feelings for Ms. Johnston." I beamed. "Of course. When it comes to divorce, the sooner the better." The moment the county clerk's office opened, I pushed Ruby's wheelchair and dashed inside. Every second I delayed was a sign of disrespect to our property settlement. "What? You and Ms. Johnston are getting a divorce?" The assistant was stunned. I almost forgot. She saw me go into the hospital room last night and then went home to rest, so she had no idea what had happened between Ruby and me. I smiled. "Congratulations. Your company is about to get a new boss's husband." I went inside, leaving the assistant standing there in a daze, still processing what I just said. When I got to the hospital room, Ruby was already awake. The moment I walked in, her icy gaze landed on me. She snorted. "You have the nerve to show your face here again." I was completely baffled. It wasn't until Ruby threw a stack of photos of me with the 10 models on the bed that I understood why she was angry. Tim was standing nearby, a smirk on his face, clearly enjoying the show. I figured it out immediately. Tim must have sent someone to take those pictures and show them to Ruby. Given Ruby's current cold demeanor, she wouldn't normally care where I was last night. I thought to myself, nice one, Tim. Seeing these photos would probably make Ruby want to divorce me even more. Ruby said coldly, you certainly had a good time. I shot back, full of self-righteousness, Ruby, you have Tim, don't you? What right do you have to blame me? But you were with 10 women, Ruby stressed, while I was in the hospital after a car crash. Her voice sounded strangely hurt. Without thinking, I said, then you should find another 9 guys. The moment the words left my mouth, Ruby's face darkened. So did Tim's. Ruby seemed furious, her chest heaving. After a long moment, she finally spoke. Do you have anything else to say about what happened last night? I asked cautiously, so, are we still getting divorced? Ruby's face turned completely black. A deep suspicion formed in her mind. But they said you loved me so much. I do, of course I do. But you know what they say. If you love someone, you have to set them free, I said, clutching my chest, my brow furrowed. You have no idea how much it pains me to make this decision. Ruby scoffed. I really can't tell. This woman was so demanding. I was letting her go freely, and she was still unhappy. How about this, then? I won't divorce you. Let's just keep this entanglement going. I glanced at Tim. As for you, Tim, please get the hell out of our lives. Ruby is my wife. Don't you have a wife of your own? Why are you trying to steal mine? Tim, who had been enjoying the show, completely lost his cool now that he was in the line of fire. His face paled, and he shot me a guilty look before shouting, no. Tim knelt, holding Ruby's hand, and cried, Ruby, we've already lost 3 years. Can you bear to lose another 3? Ruby's face, colder than ice, instantly melted. Don't cry. I never said I wouldn't get a divorce. Tim's tears turned to a smile. I knew you still had me in your heart. I silently added, I knew Tim wouldn't let me down. This was a 3-person drama, and I wasn't about to let Ruby and Tim control the plot. I said coldly, Tim, Ruby may be willing to divorce, but I never said I was. As soon as I said it, I saw Ruby's lips curl into a satisfied smile, as if to say, see, you do have feelings for me. I was baffled. What was she so satisfied about? If I didn't agree to the divorce, she couldn't be with Tim. How could she throw away her true love just for the sake of her pride? Her lack of lovesick devotion was very disappointing. Tim was stunned. But you agreed so readily yesterday. That was for the sake of half of Ruby's fortune. It had nothing to do with him. If Tim was determined to make things difficult for me, then I had to cause some trouble for him too. Tim knew the problem was with him. He pulled me into the stairwell. All right, what will it take for you to divorce Ruby? I remember after my mother passed away, your mother took all the valuable watches and antiques my mother left behind. Before I could finish, Tim immediately said, no problem. I'll sneak them out and give them back to you. I glanced at him. What a sweet, caring boy, stuffed with black-hearted cotton. And the pictures from yesterday. Tim took out his phone and promptly deleted all the photos. 3 hours later, Tim reappeared before me with a large box. I checked it. All of my mother's belongings were inside. Can we go get the divorce now? Let's go. I pushed Ruby's wheelchair into the county clerk's office. I must have been smiling too brightly, because the clerk thought we were there to get married. Hi, the marriage license line is over here. I'm in the right place. I'm here for a divorce. The clerk was taken aback, probably wondering why this man was happier than a newlywed on his wedding day. We got to the window. The clerk asked, are you sure you want to get a divorce? Yes. Well, the thing is, there's now a 1-month cooling-off period for divorces. The smile froze on my face. When did that policy start? Just last year. I sighed. Why couldn't Ruby have gotten into her car accident a year ago? A low, angry voice sounded in my ear. What did you say? Oops. Did I just say my inside thoughts out loud? I played dumb. Did I say something? You must be oversensitive. Let's go back. You need to rest, you can't be out and about for so long. Ruby's gaze was filled with a faint resentment. It was as if she were saying that when I had dragged her out of her hospital bed and pulled out her I hadn't seemed so concerned. Unlike the cheerful man who had eagerly gone to get divorced, I was dejected on the way back, my face a mask of gloom. When I got home, I had no appetite. I said to Mrs. Davis, "Could you make me a bowl of sweet rice ball soup?" Tim suddenly came downstairs, looking down on me like he was the man of the house. "Mrs. Davis, don't make anything for him. Keep an eye on the bird's nest soup I asked you to prepare." I raised an eyebrow. "Tim, what are you doing in my house?" Tim crossed his arms and sneered. "Your house? You and Ruby are divorced. This is about to become our house." He looked around, his tone critical. "What is this decorating taste? Tomorrow, I'm throwing out all these ugly decorations." I didn't have the heart to tell him that Ruby had been in charge of decorating the villa. I saw a few boxes in the corner. "Don't tell me you've already moved all your stuff in." That seemed a little hasty. "That's right, and you're just in time," Tim said, pointing to the door with an arrogant air. "Hurry up and pack your things, and get out of my house." I gave him a half smile. When Tim saw I wasn't moving, he frowned, annoyed. "Do you still think you're the man of the Johnston family?" "I am." Ruby and I hadn't finalized the divorce. But Tim didn't know that. He snorted. "Oliver, you're asking for it. Since you won't leave willingly, I'll have to call security to throw you out." He yelled, "Security! Get Oliver Quinn out of here." The security guards arrived, their attitudes still respectful. "Mr. Quinn, we're going to have to ask you to leave the Johnston residence." Tim corrected them. "What Mr. Quinn? He's divorced from Ms. Johnston. From now on, there's only one man of the Johnston family, and that's me, Tim." He was back to his King of the Castle act. I silently pulled out our marriage certificate. "Tim, you want to see what this is?" Tim glanced at it dismissively. "It's just a divorce certificate. What's there to see?" I kindly suggested, "Why don't you take a closer look?" This time, Tim looked carefully. He froze, a hint of panic in his expression. "Didn't you and Ruby go get a divorce? Did you back out?" "How could I back out? You know I'm more than happy to divorce Ruby." "Then did Ruby back out?" Tim looked like he'd been struck by lightning, his face ashen. I stopped teasing him. "Ruby didn't back out either. It's just that now there's a 1-month cooling-off period for divorces. If you want to flex your authority as the man of the house, you can come back in a month." That's what I thought. Ruby loves me so much. Now that I'm back, there's no way she wouldn't divorce you to make room for me. Tim straightened his back, his arrogant demeanor returning. I smiled sweetly. "Well said. Now please take your luggage and get out of my house." "You?" Before he could say another word, the security guards efficiently grabbed him and dragged him out. His luggage was thrown out the door after him. Their treatment of him was completely different from how they had treated me. My occasional bonuses for them had clearly paid off. Mrs. Davis also brought out the bird's nest soup. "Mr. Quinn, have this first. The sweet rice ball soup is on its way." The soup was very sweet. I don't usually like sweets, but this time, it tasted pretty good. Mrs. Davis asked, "Mr. Quinn, are you really going to divorce Ms. Johnston? She has Tim now. It would be rude of me to keep loving her. More importantly, it would be rude to the billions of dollars I was about to receive." Mrs. Davis tried to persuade me. "Mr. Quinn, maybe you should reconsider. Ms. Johnston actually loves you very much. She's just lost her memory and is confused. Once she gets her memory back, she definitely won't have anything to do with Tim." I covered her mouth. "Mrs. Davis, don't say things like that. When her memory returned and her mind cleared, I didn't know if she'd still be with Tim, but I did know that the billions I was supposed to get would be gone. No matter how head over heels Ruby was for Tim, she wouldn't just hand over half her fortune to me." I quickly lit a couple of incense sticks and started praying, my eyes full of devotion. "She's an old woman who doesn't know what she's saying. She was just kidding. Please don't take her seriously." I added, "And if you do, please wait until after I've successfully divorced Ruby before you make it happen." When Mrs. Davis entered the small prayer room, she saw me praying devoutly and thought I was praying for Ruby's well-being. she said with immense relief. I knew it. Mr. Quinn still has feelings for Ms. Johnston. Before bed, I got a call from Ruby. Her voice was cold, with an accusatory tone. Oliver Quinn, did you kick Tim out of my house? Faintly, I could hear Tim sobbing in the background. He went crying to Ruby. I admitted it freely. Yes. Her voice grew even colder. Apologized to Tim. Before I could say anything, Tim's voice, dripping with faux innocence, came through the phone. It's okay, Ruby. Oliver didn't do it on purpose. Tim, you're just too kind, Ruby said, then turned back to me. Oliver Quinn, apologize. I said cheerfully, Ruby, why don't you ask me why I kicked him out? Why else? Ruby said with certainty. You're resentful because I chose him over you. You don't have to think so highly of yourself. But I said, of course not. I'm thrilled that Tim is willing to take care of you. How could I hate him for that? It's just what? He said the house you decorated is ugly, and he wanted to tear it all down. I couldn't stand for that. You put so much effort into decorating this house. Ruby's voice grew even colder. Really? Of course. The security guards and Mrs. Davis heard him. On the other end, Tim was frantically trying to explain. Ruby, let me make up an excuse. No, Ruby, let me explain. The line went dead. Ruby had hung up. I was a little disappointed. Why did she hang up? I wanted to hear the rest of the drama. Ruby really had poured her heart and soul into decorating this villa. Whenever she traveled abroad for business, she would buy beautiful furniture and decorations to bring back. To be honest, her taste wasn't bad. For Tim to question her taste and threaten to tear down the house she had worked so hard on, I didn't believe for a second that Ruby wouldn't be angry. Tim was in for a rough night. After several failed attempts to get under my skin, Tim finally quieted down for a while. I guessed he was waiting for the day of our divorce, when everything was settled, so he could mock me from his so-called victor's pedestal. By then, I'd be the youngest billionaire in the country. Why would I care about one woman? While Ruby was recuperating in the hospital, I went to work on a new film. One day, as soon as I got to the set, my assistant, Kevin, rushed over. Oliver, bad news. Someone's trying to take your leading role. I thought I must have misheard. Ruby was the investor for this film. If the studio replaced the male lead now, wouldn't they be offending her? If Ruby pulled her funding, could the film even continue? Kevin saw my confusion. Oliver, it was Ms. Johnston who told the studio to replace you. She wants Tim to play the lead. They're on set right now. Hearing that, I couldn't just sit there. I went to find Ruby immediately. I hadn't seen her in over half a month. She was already able to walk on her own. I looked at Ruby, then at Tim. Great. Ruby had lost weight and so had Tim. I could tell that Tim had indeed been taking very good care of her. My voice was laced with anger. Ruby, are you serious? Tim doesn't know how to act. How can he play the lead? Ruby's eyes were cold as she glanced at me. Tim wants to try, so let him. Who knows, he might have a hidden talent for it. Oliver, please just let me try it once. I've dreamed of being an actor my whole life. Tim tugged at my sleeve, looking at me with pitiful, tear-filled eyes, on the verge of crying. I bet if I dared to say no, the tears would start streaming down his face. I didn't know if he had a talent for acting, but he definitely had a talent for playing the victim. Fine, do whatever you want. The investor had spoken. My refusal wouldn't have mattered anyway. That day, I went from being the male lead to the villainous supporting character. The moment Tim saw the script, his face darkened. Aren't I the male lead? How can the supporting character throw wine on me and slap me? The director enthusiastically explained the scene. Well, the supporting character's fiancé falls in love with you. His character is arrogant and domineering, so of course he's going to bully you to vent his anger. Can't I be the one to slap Oliver? No, you're the innocent male lead. If you slapped the supporting character, it would be out of character. Tim had wanted to be the male lead to enjoy the glamour, but after getting the script, his face visibly soured. I said with a grin, Tim, isn't being an actor your dream? Is that all you've got? You can't handle a little hardship? No, I just think the script is a bit unreasonable. Tim subconsciously looked at Ruby, But before he could play the victim and get her to change the scene, she cut him off. Tim, Oliver is right. If you want to be a good actor, you have to endure these things. Tim bit his lip, looking aggrieved. I know. A while later, Tim and I were both in costume. The director asked, "Is everyone ready?" I cracked my knuckles, eager to start. "I'm ready, director." Tim's small face turned pale. He looked like he was about to cry again. This time, it wasn't an act. He was genuinely scared. Cut. The director walked over to Tim and explained the scene for what felt like the 10th time. Tim, your emotion is wrong. You're the innocent male lead, not the hero of a revenge story. When Oliver slaps you, you're supposed to cry. What's with that murderous glare? Tim was on the verge of tears. This wasn't how he had imagined acting. In his imagination, the entire crew would be fawning over him. Not like this, with the director repeatedly telling him his performance was subpar and him having to do take after take. He had already done 16 takes, which meant I had thrown water on him 16 times and slapped him 16 times. Tim complained, "Director, aren't you being a little too strict with me? I'm new to acting. How am I supposed to cry on cue? Can't I just use eye drops?" The director said, No, you have the talent for it." A glimmer of a smile finally appeared on Tim's face. He feigned modesty. "Oh, really?" "Yes," the director praised sincerely. "You were crying quite convincingly in front of Ms. Johnston just now." The smile vanished from Tim's face. He suspected the director was throwing shade, and he had evidence. I couldn't help but laugh. Tim shot me a glare and walked over to Ruby, complaining pitifully, "Ruby, my face hurts from Oliver's slaps." So he wanted to play the victim? I could do that too. I followed him and said with a pained expression, "Tim, you think my hand doesn't hurt?" Tim was speechless. How could that be the same thing? My interruption threw him off his game. He dropped the act and said directly, "Ruby, I can't do this scene. Can you get the screenwriter to change it?" Ruby tapped her fingers on the table, her eyes lowered, as if seriously considering his suggestion. Ever since she woke up, she had been completely compliant with his wishes. He never thought she would refuse, so he started to relax. Then he heard her say coolly, "You should quit." "Ruby, I knew you couldn't bear to see me suffer." "Wait." Tim belatedly realized what she'd said. "What did you just say?" "I said you should quit. I can see you have no talent for acting. If the show airs, it would be a cruel disservice to the show, the audience, and you," Ruby said. "Tim, you need to have some self-awareness. If you really want to act, I can send you to drama school first." I breathed a sigh of relief. Ruby wasn't completely blinded by love. After all, she still had some sense. As for Tim, his gaze toward Ruby was now filled with resentment. He knew that once Ruby made a decision, she wouldn't change it. He could only say reluctantly, "I'll do whatever you say." I thought we could finally get back to filming properly. But a couple of days later, the director gave me some terrible news. Ruby had pulled her funding. Until we found a new investor, we couldn't continue shooting. It didn't take a genius to figure out that Tim must have persuaded her to do it. I told the director, "It's fine. It's not a big deal." I counted on my fingers. In 3 more days, I could finally divorce Ruby. Then I'd be rich. It didn't matter if we didn't have an investor, I'd become the investor. Since I wasn't filming for the time being, I went home to rest. I hadn't been home in a few days, and I found the house unusually lively. Mrs. Davis pulled me aside. "Tim threw a party for Ms. Johnston to celebrate her being discharged from the hospital," she said, frowning. "Ms. Johnston just got out of the hospital and needs to rest. This is just reckless. Mr. Quinn, please go talk to her and tell her not to go along with Tim's nonsense." I went into the backyard and saw Ruby right away. The autumn air was crisp and dewy. The moonlight draped over her, making her seem cold and solitary, as if the bustling party around her had nothing to do with her. As for Tim, he was holding a wine glass, laughing and chatting with his friends. Ruby's gaze was fixed on him, her eyes rational and cold, as if looking at a stranger, filled with scrutiny and a hint of confusion. It wasn't until she noticed me that she slowly withdrew her gaze. She said mockingly, "You finally decided to come see me." If you listened closely, you could hear the resentment in her voice. I scoffed. "You have Tim. What difference does it make whether I come see you or not? If I didn't know how deeply she loved him, I would have thought from her tone that she still had feelings for me. But you did come to see me, Ruby said with certainty. You still have me in your heart. You're overthinking it. The only thing in my heart is your billions. Ruby pointed to the seat opposite her. See, she looked like she wanted to have a serious talk with me, so I sat down. She looked at me deeply and asked quietly, Oliver, do I really like Tim? I was stunned. Didn't Ruby love Tim to the bone? Why would she ask such a question? Of course you do. Do you know why you married me? Because my profile looks like his. Ruby's gaze swept over my face, inch by inch, before she came to a conclusion. You two look nothing alike. Maybe your brain isn't the only thing that's broken. Your eyes must be going too. Ruby shot me a warning look and continued, I thought I loved him. That's what you all told me. But I've found that the more time I spend with him, the more I dislike him. Oh, that just proves that women are fickle. You're nothing but a heartless player. Ruby said irritably, Oliver, if you don't have anything nice to say, you can shut up. I made a zipping motion across my lips and said nothing. She continued, I've been dreaming about you lately. Feels like you're the one I truly like. That's not good. I was still waiting to divorce her and get half her money. I finally got anxious. Dreams are the opposite of reality. In fact, you can't stand me. Really? I thought so at first, too. You're heartless, inconsiderate, and you don't know how to talk nicely, but the more I listened, the more my brow furrowed. Was that a compliment? It sounded more like she was insulting me. Just then, Tim appeared. Oliver, you're here. Have you eaten? The food at the party today was all made by a 5-star hotel chef. You should go try some. He held a wine glass, looking relaxed and at ease, like the man of the house. His interruption cut our conversation short. She only asked me one last question. Is there anything you want to say to me? I actually did have something. Ruby, don't forget we have to go to the county clerk's office in 3 days to get divorced. Ruby's face immediately darkened. She felt like her heartfelt confession had just been thrown to the dogs. She said, go eat your food. I immediately walked over to the food table without giving her a second glance. I was actually a little hungry. I don't know why, but I've been getting hungry easily lately, and I've been a bit bloated. This wouldn't do. I ate a small cake with tears in my eyes, silently telling myself that I would start my diet after this meal. After eating, I rubbed my slightly protruding belly and went for a walk by the lake to digest. Tim followed me. I stopped. What is it? Tim said gently, Oliver, after the divorce, can you please stay away from Ruby? Don't worry. I'm not interested in getting back with an ex. I walked on slowly, noticing that Tim was still following me. He was like a ghost, not saying a word, which was starting to freak me out. I stopped again and asked irritably, what else do you want? Oliver, since you're being so nice, could you do me one last favor? I raised an eyebrow. Wasn't he pushing his luck? He had stolen my wife in name at least. If I agreed to everything he asked, they'd have to build a statue of me for being such a pushover. Before I could refuse, Tim glanced at something behind me, suddenly grabbed my hand, and yelled, Oliver, don't. As he yelled, he started pulling me toward the lake. I instantly understood what he was trying to do. He wanted to make it look like I had pushed him in. I knew what he was up to. He must have sensed that Ruby didn't love him as much as he thought. If he framed me like this, the next time I appeared in front of Ruby, she would only feel deep disgust for this vicious man. This would eliminate any chance of her old feelings for me resurfacing. Hilarious. Tim was overthinking it. Ruby had no feelings for me at all. I was getting angry. If he wanted to jump in the lake, fine. But why did he have to drag me down with him? It was a cold, dewy night. The lake water would be freezing. I couldn't afford to catch a cold. I had no intention of getting back with Ruby, and I didn't care what she thought of me anymore. I made a split-second decision. I wrenched my hand free with all my might, then kicked him into the lake, muttering, "Get in there." With a splash, Tim fell into the water. Just as I thought, the moment he hit the water, he started flailing wildly, screaming, "Ruby, help me." Oliver pushed me in. "Ruby, Save me. TSK, not a bad performance. If he had shown half this acting ability on set, the director wouldn't have had to call cut so many times. But I guess this was a passive skill for him, one that only activated 100% when Ruby was around. I had no interest in watching this farce. I turned to leave, but Tim's cold, slippery hand grabbed my ankle. Caught completely off guard, I was dragged into the lake. As the cold, wet water closed over my head, I had only one thought: it's over. I'm just collateral damage. Ruby was deeply in love with Tim. She would definitely save him first, and they would have a tender moment. By the time they remembered me, a guy who can't swim, I would have already sunk to the bottom. I finally understood. Tim wasn't trying to frame me, he wanted me dead. If I were dead, I would never be a threat to his position. Unexpectedly, Ruby didn't even glance at Tim. She dived into the lake and headed straight for me. After she pulled me out, I was coughing up water and shivering from the cold. Seeing this, Ruby quickly took off her blazer and draped it over my shoulders. I stared at the heavy, soaking wet jacket and fell silent. Great job. Never do it again. I was seriously starting to suspect that Ruby hadn't just lost her memory, she'd lost her mind too. Seeing someone shivering from the cold and then thoughtfully wrapping them in a wet piece of clothing was not something a normal person would do. Ruby seemed to realize it too. She was silent for a few seconds, then quietly took the wet jacket back. She was probably embarrassed to have done something so stupid in front of me. She grew angry out of shame and threw the expensive, custom-made jacket into the lake. The jacket landed, coincidentally, right on Tim's head. Great. Now Tim could feel that heavy love too. That's right, Tim was still flailing in the lake. Look at that professional swimming form. If it weren't for the fact that he was still yelling for help, any passerby would have thought he was just out for a swim. He was a dedicated actor. Even though Ruby and I could both see that the biggest flaw in this drama was himself, he continued to perform with a serious expression, diligently playing out his one-man show. Ruby stood beside me, watching his performance with cold eyes, showing no intention of saving him. I was surprised. Ruby, why aren't you saving him? I'm not blind. He can swim. And her voice filled with a murderous rage. He dragged you into the water. I reminded her, he's the one you've always loved. I'm just a stand-in. According to the usual script, shouldn't the old flame be right no matter what they do? Ruby held me tighter, as if trying to merge me into her own body. Her usually calm and cold face was filled with fear. She said, "The moment he dragged you under, my heart panicked. My world plunged into endless darkness and cold, as if nothing mattered anymore. In that moment, I understood that you are the one I love. You were right, my brain is broken, and my memory has deceived me." The more I listened, the more I felt something was wrong. From what Ruby was saying, it seemed she was convinced that I was her one true love. After hearing her heartfelt confession, I had only one thought: can we still get divorced? She wanted to say more, but I had already pulled away from her, afraid she would say she didn't want a divorce. I watched him still struggling in the water, diligently yelling for help, and a classic line popped into my head: "You can scream your lungs out, but no one is coming to save you." By the time I realized it, I had already said it out loud. Tim fell silent. Seeing our two indifferent faces, he suddenly couldn't keep up the act. Tim quickly swam to shore, demonstrating what it means to struggle for 10 minutes and get out in 10 seconds. The cold wind blew, and he sneezed, his body shivering. Tim ran to Ruby and accused her. "Ruby, why didn't you save me just now? Was it because Oliver stopped you?" His resentful gaze drifted to me. "Oliver, how could you be so mean?" Ruby stepped in front of me. "It has nothing to do with Oliver." Tim was surprised she would defend me. "Then why didn't you save me?" Ruby said coldly, "I saw everything. You fell in on purpose and you pulled Oliver in with you." Tim looked flustered, but he quickly calmed down. He pouted, his voice petulant. "Yes, I did it on purpose. The thought of him having you for 3 years drives me crazy with jealousy. I was so afraid you would fall in love with him. You can understand that, can't you?" He said it with such confidence. He was sure that Ruby loved him and would tolerate all his outrageous behavior. Ruby gave him a faint smile and slowly uttered 2 words. Get out. Tim was stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief. What did you say? He never expected that Ruby, who had always been so gentle and accommodating, would say such a thing. Even I was surprised. That was the man Ruby had been dreaming of for 3 years. Had her brain really been damaged? Ruby's voice was icy. I said, get out. Tim's eyes widened in shock. Ruby, are you crazy? Ruby retorted, do I look crazy to you? Tim suddenly panicked. He grabbed her sleeve. Ruby, don't leave me. I only did it because I love you so much and I'm so afraid of losing you. I wanted to make Oliver look bad so you would feel sorry for me and only love me. You'll forgive me, right? Ruby said nothing, gently brushing his hand away. Then she took out a handkerchief and meticulously wiped the spot where his fingers had touched her. She looked as if he were carrying some disgusting virus. She didn't say a word, but her actions clearly showed her disgust. Tim looked hurt and confused. Ruby, why did you suddenly change? You loved me so much before. Ruby said calmly, no, I haven't changed. I never loved you. It's just that when I woke up from the accident, it was like a command had been programmed into my brain. I love you, and I must be good to you. But you're vain, stupid, and malicious. I really can't figure out what I ever saw in you that made me keep you around to observe. The fact is, there's nothing about you worth liking, Ruby said, looking at him suspiciously. Tim, this sweet past you told me about, did it really exist? With every word Ruby spoke, Tim's face grew paler. Finally, he looked away guiltily. Afraid of what else she might say, he said, enough, stop talking. I'll leave. Okay? He covered his face and ran off, sobbing. I figured I should leave too. I had only taken a few steps when Ruby called out to me. Oliver Quinn, don't you have anything to say to me? I thought for a moment and then said slowly, Ruby, you're a good person. The moment she heard that, her temples throbbed. She looked at me intently. Go on. Her gaze was so intense that I had to look away. We're not right for each other. You always saw me as a substitute. When you get your memory back, you'll definitely regret what you did today. You should go after Tim before he gets too far. Whether I go after him is my business, Ruby said, her voice turning cold. I'm talking about us. Her presence was so overwhelming that I actually felt a little scared. I couldn't help but take a step back and say, with the desperation of someone with nothing to lose, we still have to get divorced. Oliver Quinn, have you really thought this through? What a joke. Did I even need to think about it? Divorcing Ruby meant getting half her fortune. Every second I hesitated was an insult to that money. My voice became much lighter. I thought it all through. I came to find you today to remind you. 3 days from now, 9 o'clock at the county clerk's office. Don't be late. The night was dark, the stars faint. Ruby's gaze was as cold as water. I shivered for no reason. Ruby gritted her teeth. Fine. Whoever backs out is a coward. I nodded in satisfaction. Hearing her promise put my mind at ease. I must have caught a chill, because that night I came down with a cold. I also felt nauseous and kept dry heaving, but nothing came up. I value my life, so I went to the hospital for a checkup that night. After a series of tests, the doctor came over with the report, his expression grave. Mr. Quinn, the results are in. It's a bit complicated. I was so shocked my phone fell to the floor. Could you say that again? The doctor handed me the report and pointed to the numbers. The initial diagnosis is chronic kidney disease. While it's not too severe at the moment, it will require long-term medication and regular checkups. I was silent. No wonder. I had recently started craving sweets, my body was a bit swollen, and I even had a small belly. It wasn't weight gain, it was a ticking time bomb inside me. Marrying into a rich family, becoming a substitute, and now getting diagnosed with a major illness right before a divorce. I had hit every cliché in the book. My big mouth really did jinx everything. I left the hospital with a huge bag of medicine and ran right into Ruby, who was also there for a checkup. She was already weak from her previous illness, and after jumping into the freezing lake to save me and standing in the cold wind for so long, she had developed a high fever that night. When Ruby saw me coming out of the hospital, she gave me a cool glance. Are you sick? Seeing her, I felt a sudden wave of guilt. Ruby snorted, didn't look at me again, and walked quickly into the hospital. I breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed she believed me. I told Aaron about my illness. Aaron asked, Oliver, are you sure about this? You're really going to handle this alone? I insisted, what else? Should I tell her so she can pity me? Okay, it's your decision. So you're really going to do it alone? Yeah. You know, my mom died young and my dad remarried. They don't love me. Technically, I don't have any family, I said. With this money, at least I'll be financially secure for the rest of my life and can get proper treatment. It was strange. The illness came on so suddenly, but I didn't feel much fear. Instead, I had a clearer plan for the future. I knew I had to live for myself and live well. So you're going to keep this from Ruby? I nodded. Yeah. Actually, on the morning of Ruby's accident, we had argued about having a child. My mind drifted back to that morning. That day, I was sitting at the vanity, adjusting my tie. Ruby wrapped her arms around me from behind, her warm breath on the back of my neck as she kissed me. I gently pushed her away, smiling. Don't mess around. I have an event to get to. She leaned against me lazily, a little clingy. Oliver, we've been married for 3 years. It's time we adopted a child. My smile faded a little. Ruby, are you still half asleep? I'm serious, Oliver. Let's adopt a child. I turned around and saw that her handsome eyes were filled with seriousness. I chuckled lightly. Ruby, don't tell me you've caught feelings. Ruby straightened up, her smile gone, and looked down at me. Oliver, we've been married for 3 years. How do you really see me? I thought about it carefully. A sugar mama? A compatible bed partner? In any case, I had never seen her as a wife. Neither of those answers seemed to be what she wanted to hear. The longer I was silent, the uglier her expression became. Finally, she lifted my chin and looked at me scrutinizingly. Oliver Quinn, after 3 years, do you really not have any feelings for me at all? I gently pushed her hand away and said perfunctorily, of course I have feelings. After all, you've been so good to me. I wasn't lying. I did have feelings for her, but just a little, the kind I could pull away from at any moment. After all, falling in love with a woman who had another man in her heart was just asking for trouble. I wasn't that stupid. Besides, every time she did something that touched me, she would always follow it up with, Oliver, don't get the wrong idea. I'm only being this good to you because you look a bit like Tim. How could I dare to like her? Ruby said in a low voice, then adopt a child with me. I still refused. Ruby, our situation isn't suitable for a child. Our marriage had started on a dishonest note. She used me as a stand-in and I used her as a patron. If we had a child, and Tim came back one day, who knew if the ever-devoted Ruby would betray our family? My dad had betrayed my mom. They fought for most of their lives, and she died with a broken heart. 2 days after she died, my dad eagerly married Tim's mother and brought home his new stepson. My stepmother didn't abuse me, she just joined my dad and Tim in ignoring and isolating me, making me feel like an outsider in my own home. I knew firsthand how painful it was for a child to be born into a loveless family. I had suffered enough for one person, I wouldn't let my child go through the same thing. At that time, Ruby gave me a deep look, her eyes full of disappointment. She looked as if I had betrayed her. She threw out a curt "I understand" and slammed the door on her way out. The next time I heard about her, she was on her way to pick up Tim and had gotten into a car accident. I became even more certain that I had been right to refuse her that day. This woman could say she loved me and wanted to have a child with me 1 minute, and the next, she could give her heart to another man. I even hated her a little, hated how casually she treated love. If I hadn't been so clear-headed, I would have fallen into her trap and been tormented by this ridiculous love. I had already made up my mind to divorce her. This illness had nothing to do with her. I was confident that I could take good care of myself. 3 days later, just as I was about to leave for the county clerk's office, I got a call from her assistant. Mr. Quinn, Ms. Johnston's fever won't break. She's still in the hospital and can't go with you to the county clerk's office. My good mood was instantly shattered. I stared at the ceiling listlessly. Why was it so hard to get a divorce? The assistant continued, Mr. Quinn, Ms. Johnston keeps calling your name. Do you want to go see her? No thanks. What she needs right now is a doctor, not me. Let me know when she wakes up. The assistant sighed. I understand. Since I wasn't filming lately, I had time to focus on my health. A week later, the director called me excitedly. Oliver, great news. We found an investor for our show. We can start filming again next week. I looked at my pile of medicine. It was difficult, but with my health, I couldn't act anymore. Fortunately, the show had only been filming for a couple of days, so my withdrawal wouldn't cause too much of a loss for the production. I told the director the truth. Director, I have some health issues. I can't do this show anymore. You should find another actor. I'll compensate the production for any losses. But Oliver, the investor really likes your acting and specifically requested you. If you're not in the show, she might pull her funding. The director suggested, how about this? We'll treat the investor to dinner, and you can explain the situation to her in person. If you talk to her nicely, she'll definitely understand and might not pull her funding. Okay. That night, I went to the private room we had booked. When I saw the woman sitting there, my expression immediately soured. It was my ex-girlfriend, Vivian, who had been abroad for almost 4 years. Our breakup had not been a pleasant experience. Even after 3 or 4 years, I still hated her. When Vivian saw me, she smiled gently. Oliver, you're here. Come, sit. The director, hearing her familiar tone, chuckled. Oh, so you two know each other. Vivian's gentle gaze swept over my face, very carefully. She said, it's been a few years. You've gotten even more handsome, Oliver. I said sarcastically, it's been a few years, and you've certainly become more glamorous. Vivian had a flawlessly beautiful face. That was why, back in college, I had agreed to date her out of all her suitors. Aaron had called me shallow back then, saying Vivian was nothing but a pretty face. Dating a poor student like her would be boring. I remember my reply, how could it be boring? Just looking at her face made me happy. Turned out I was too naive back then. I ended up getting badly burned by her. After all these years, Vivian had shed her student-like innocence. She carried herself with a calm and confident air, exuding an aura of wealth. Her face, I had to admit, was even more beautiful than before. But now, just looking at her face annoyed me. Vivian wasn't offended by my words. Just like she used to, she silently rinsed the bowl and chopsticks with hot water before placing them in front of me. Vivian said thoughtfully, Oliver, I ordered your old favorites. I don't know if your tastes have changed. She placed the menu in front of me. See if there's anything else you want to order. I said listlessly, no, this is fine. During the meal, the director brought up the purpose of the dinner. So, the thing is, due to health reasons, Oliver is no longer able to star in this show. I know you invested in this show because of him, so I wanted to let you know. Vivian glanced at the director casually. You're hoping I'll continue to invest, is that right? Yes. Vivian asked me, Oliver, what do you think? I forced a smile. Of course, I hope you'll continue to support our show. Then we'll do as Oliver says. The director, relieved that the matter was settled, made an excuse to step out, leaving us alone. Vivian looked at me with an unreadable expression, her face serious. Oliver, divorce Ruby and get back together with me. I have money now, I can give you a good life. I heard Ruby hasn't been treating you well these past few years, and recently, she even brought Tim back home. Before I could answer, the door was thrown open. I turned to see Ruby standing there. She looked furious. Vivian, what are you dreaming about? Oliver is mine. I was startled by her sudden appearance. Then I noticed her eyes were clear, not cloudy and confused like before. I immediately understood. Ruby, you got your memory back? Yes. My first thought was, oh no. Since she had her memory back, she would definitely remember the property agreement we signed. She would never let me get that half of the settlement. My dream of becoming a billionaire was about to be shattered. My second thought was, wait a minute. Since she had her memory back, why was she here fighting with my ex instead of running to her old flame? Tim? Was it just a woman's strange possessiveness? When rivals meet, sparks fly. Vivian sneered. Ruby, Oliver won't be yours for long. If I remember correctly, you've been trying to divorce him and he agreed, right? That was because I had amnesia and my memory was confused. I mistook Tim for Oliver. Ha, as if you love Oliver so much. If I remember correctly, you only married him because he looks like Tim. I sat there, watching the two women fight over me while I ate the fruit platter. When I heard Vivian's retort, I secretly nodded. Vivian, from this day on, you're my spokesperson. Ruby asked, do you think Oliver looks like Tim? Vivian answered without hesitation, of course not. She sneered, I don't know how blind you have to be to think they look alike. Ruby nodded. In my heart, Oliver has always been one of a kind. I never saw him as a substitute for Tim. Ha, you're the only one who believes that. I nodded vigorously. Exactly. Ruby noticed that I didn't believe her either. She looked at me, silent for a few seconds, as if she had finally made a decision. She let out a slow breath and said, with difficulty, Oliver, from the very beginning you were the one I liked. But I knew you had Vivian in your heart. Back then, I was too proud and competitive, so I said that I was using you as a substitute for Tim. It was as if by saying that, I wouldn't be the weaker one in our relationship. My eyes widened slightly. I had Vivian in my heart? What on earth had I done to give her that impression? I wished Vivian would drop dead. But I still didn't quite believe what Ruby was saying. I swallowed a piece of watermelon and said slowly, but the moment Tim came back, you went to pick him up. At the mention of this, Ruby shot Vivian a fierce glare. I wasn't going to pick up Tim. I was going to settle a score with Vivian. It turned out that was the day Vivian had returned to the country as well. She had sent me a text, telling me she was back and wanted to see me. She had heard that Ruby wasn't treating me well. Now that she was successful, she could give me a good future, and she hoped I would reconsider being with her. In short, she was trying to get me to break up with Ruby and get back with her. That day, Ruby saw the text, was furious, and secretly deleted it. At the same time, a deep sense of insecurity washed over her. Vivian was back, and she would eventually find me. Ruby was afraid we would rekindle our old flame. So that day, she suddenly suggested we have a child. She thought that, for the sake of the child, I would settle down and be with her. But I refused. This only confirmed to Ruby that I still had feelings for Vivian and didn't want to have a child with her. After our unhappy exchange, Ruby stormed out, furious, to find Vivian and warn her to stay away from me. On her way to the airport, she got into the car accident and was found by Tim. After she woke up, her memory was jumbled, and she mistakenly believed she loved Tim and was on her way to the airport to find him. And the vain Tim went along with the lie. What Ruby said sounded absurd, but there was a strange logic to it. I asked Vivian, did you really send me a text? Vivian nodded, her gaze gentle. Oliver, I never knew you had been thinking of me all these years. I immediately retorted, how could I be thinking of you? I wish you were dead. Vivian didn't believe me. I believe my rival wouldn't lie to me. I was confused. Ruby, I haven't mentioned Vivian once in all these years. Why did you think I was still in love with her? Ruby replied, I visited you on set a few times and often saw you staring at Vivian's college photos for a long time. I was speechless. I was doing that for my acting. Whenever I couldn't get into character, I would look at her picture. The thought of how she not only played with my feelings but also stole my money would bring up all the sadness, anger, and grief I needed. Then, when I did a scene with someone, the emotions would come naturally. It was my way of recycling an ex. I really did hate Vivian. Back then, we had planned to get married after graduation. But then she took off to study abroad without a word and even stole a valuable watch my mother had left me to fund her trip. She had the audacity to claim she was doing it so she could give me a better future when she returned. I was furious. Playing with my feelings was one thing, but stealing my money was another. Even though she later earned money, bought back the watch, and returned it to me, I still hated her. It was the first time I had been so thoroughly screwed over by a woman. After the truth came out, a look of regret appeared on Ruby's face. She hated that she had been too proud to admit she loved me, causing me to misunderstand her for so many years and nearly leading us to divorce. As for Vivian, she looked at me with sad eyes. Oliver, is there really no chance for us? I only did what I did back then because I wanted to give you a better future. I said bluntly, Just looking at you now makes me sick." The moment the words left my mouth, I felt a wave of nausea and dry heaved into the trash can. Ruby gently patted my back to make me more comfortable. After I was done, she gently and patiently wiped the corner of my mouth, not at all disgusted. She was worried about my health and insisted on taking me to the hospital for a full checkup. With everything out in the open, I realized that Ruby might actually love me quite a bit. But thinking about everything she had done, I couldn't bring myself to feel anything good for her. Once we got to the hospital, there would be no hiding my illness anyway. So, in the car, I told her directly, "Ruby, I'm sick." Ruby froze and pulled the car over to the side of the road. Her eyes were filled with pain. "Nope." I pulled my coat tighter and pushed her hand away, my face cold. Ruby was stunned. "Oliver, do you still hate me? Isn't it obvious? Shouldn't I hate you? Do you think that just because you say you love me, I should be moved to tears?" I glanced at her and sneered. "I just think you're an idiot. If you suspected I was still hung up on Vivian, couldn't you have just asked? Are you mute?" Thankfully, while Ruby didn't have a voice, I didn't have a heart. If I were some damsel in distress protagonist, my heart would have been stabbed 1,000 times by her cold and heartless behavior. Liking women is less reliable than liking money. Money won't betray you, and it can buy you happiness. Ruby's voice was hoarse. I didn't give her a chance to continue. "Do you think you're so noble, marrying me even though my heart belonged to someone else? You probably felt wronged all the time, so whenever you were unhappy, you'd take a jab at me, reminding me of my place, that I was just a substitute. You felt wronged, but what about me, who knew nothing about it? Didn't I feel wronged too?" To be fair, Ruby had been good to me. For one thing, she had funded several of my film and TV projects. My mother died young, and my father and stepmother focused all their attention on Tim, so I was a bit starved for love. Sometimes I would think maybe Ruby does love me. But then she would hit me with a cold reminder that I was just a substitute and needed to know my place, and it would leave a dull ache in my heart. Over time, I stopped having any expectations and just saw her as my patron. Ruby's face was pale, revealing a rare vulnerability. "Oliver, what do I have to do for you to forgive me? Divorce me and give me the money according to the agreement. Stay true to the original goal." I felt that no matter how many times Ruby said she loved me, it was less tangible than a pile of cash. "No," Ruby refused flatly. "I almost lost you once. I will never let you go." "Who said divorce is the end? This is a new beginning for us. I've always felt our marriage was too rushed, too childish," I proposed. "Why don't we start over? You can pursue me again and make up for the pain I suffered in this marriage. We can be like a normal couple, date and then get married." Ruby looked at me suspiciously. "What if you don't marry me again?" I tried to persuade her. "Ruby, haven't you heard the saying? The way to test if a woman loves you is to see if she's willing to stay with you when you're down on your luck. You've just gotten your memory back and you're on top of the world, while I've just been diagnosed with this illness. When you had amnesia and were entangled with Tim, I never gave up on our marriage. Doesn't that prove my feelings for you?" My eyes turned red, and I looked aggrieved. Ruby looked at me deeply, then finally sighed, as if she was powerless against me. "Okay, I agree." I almost burst out laughing. Luckily, I was a professional actor. I held it in. That day, Ruby and I got our divorce certificate. A week later, the lawyers divided the assets according to the agreement we had signed. A month later, $23.5 billion landed in my bank account. I became the youngest single billionaire. 3 years later, I became one of the most sought-after directors. Acting became a side hustle. When I first got sick, I was bored and read a lot of novels, which gave me the idea to adapt them into films and TV shows. Conveniently, I had the time and money, so I spent a fortune buying the rights and turning them into scripts. I cast actors who fit the original characters' images. The actors I hired were expensive, but that was their only flaw. And for me, that wasn't a big problem. I had money, and I could be as whimsical as I wanted. With solid scripts and perfect casting, every show I directed was a hit. The original fans were happy, the audience was happy, and my wallet was happy. This led to a problem. Some young beauties would often try to get close to me in hopes of getting a role in my shows. To be honest, they were all very easy on the eyes. In those situations, I would invite them all over to my house to play werewolf. Forever young, forever in love with werewolf. One day, the doorbell rang. My son, Liam, went to open the door with his nanny. It was Ruby. Aunt Ruby, you're here. Ruby pinched Liam's cheek and handed him a gift. How many times have I told you? You have to call me Mommy. Liam said in a sweet, childish voice. My dad said that until you two get married again, you're my aunt. Ruby knelt down. Liam, you have to convince your dad. It's been 3 years. He should have forgiven me by now. Don't you want a mommy? Liam smiled. No, I like the other ladies who come to our house better. They're younger and prettier than you. Ruby laughed in exasperation. You little rascal. Just like your father. I heard Ruby's voice and called out. Ruby, come on in. Ruby's face lit up. After 3 years, was I finally ready to forgive her? When she opened the living room door, her face darkened. It wasn't just me, there were 2 young beauties with me. She asked in a low voice, what did you want me for? I patted the empty seat next to me. You're just in time. We're playing mahjong and we're short 1 player. Just for that? I smiled. Are you in or out? Ruby gritted her teeth, her eyes looking like she wanted to eat me alive. I'm in. Late at night, the mahjong game finally ended. Ruby asked me, Oliver, it's been 3 years. When are you going to forgive me and accept me? I said, we'll see. After all, life as a single, rich bachelor is just too good.